In a small, tense courtroom, the air was thick with anticipation. Everyone had gathered for one simple reason: to witness the final decision in a custody battle that had been dragging on for months. On one side was the father, desperate to maintain his parental rights, fighting for a chance to remain a part of his daughter's life. On the other side stood the mother, determined to take full control, and her legal team, armed with accusations and documents that painted the father as unfit. The judge, weary from the back and forth, was prepared to make a ruling that would forever change the lives of everyone in the room. But no one knew that the most shocking part of the case had yet to unfold. The courtroom was filled with the hushed murmur of spectators, most of whom had been following the case closely. It had been a bitter battle from the beginning. Rumors swirled that the father had been falsely accused, that he was a victim of a vindictive ex-wife with a hidden agenda. But what had truly made the case stand out was the involvement of their young daughter, Lily. At just 10 years old, she had been at the center of the dispute, caught between two parents who couldn't seem to agree on anything. Lily had always been the quiet, observant type. She didn't speak much in school or at home, preferring to listen and watch rather than engage in the chaos around her. But today, as she sat at the witness stand, it was clear that she was about to do something no one could have expected. The court had heard all kinds of testimony: the mother's claims of neglect, the father's side of the story defending his parenting abilities. But Lily was about to reveal something that would make the entire courtroom fall silent. As she sat nervously on the witness stand, her small hands clutched the edge of the chair. She was visibly scared, her wide eyes darting between the judge, her mother, and her father. No one could blame her for feeling this way. She had been asked to speak in front of a room full of strangers about the people who were supposed to protect her, and the weight of that responsibility was too much for any child to bear. The mother, sitting across from her, looked on with a mixture of cold calculation and mild irritation. She had prepared Lily for this moment, pushing her to say the right things. The mother had even coached her on what to say to make sure the judge would side with her. To her, this was just another step in securing her victory in the courtroom. But she didn't know that Lily had a secret, one that would turn everything upside down. The judge, a stern but fair woman, leaned forward, glancing at the young girl with a mix of sympathy and curiosity. "Lily," she began, her voice soft but firm, "I know this is difficult. But if there's something you need to tell us, something important that could help me understand what's best for you, now is the time to speak." Lily hesitated for a long moment, her lips trembling slightly. Her gaze was fixed on the table in front of her, as if trying to find the words that had eluded her for so long. The courtroom was silent, everyone waiting for her to speak, to give them some kind of insight into what she was feeling. But no one, not even her mother, could have predicted what would happen next. Finally, Lily took a deep breath, her small voice barely audible. "There's something I need to show you," she said, her hands shaking as she slowly reached into her backpack. She pulled out a small, worn envelope, carefully holding it in her lap. The room seemed to hold its breath as she opened it with delicate fingers, revealing what appeared to be a stack of papers. Papers that no one had seen before. For a moment, no one moved. The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "What's in the envelope, Lily?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with an unmistakable sense of curiosity. Lily looked up at her mother, who was now visibly stiff with discomfort, before turning her gaze back to the judge. She slowly slid the papers across the table, toward the judge. The room was so still you could hear a pin drop as the judge carefully picked up the first sheet. She scanned it quickly, her eyes narrowing as she read. Then, one by one, she flipped through the pages, each one seemingly more shocking than the last. Her face remained neutral, but it was clear that the contents of these papers were changing the course of the trial in ways no one had anticipated. Lily's mother shot out of her seat, her face pale with shock and anger. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Where did you get these?" Her words were laced with panic, but Lily didn't flinch. She had made her decision, and now it was too late to stop it. As the judge continued to read through the papers, the silence in the courtroom grew unbearable. The mother's attempt to maintain control was faltering. She paced back and forth, her face contorted with frustration, but Lily didn't look at her. Her attention was solely on the judge now, the only person who mattered in this moment. And what Lily had just done, the simple act of revealing the truth, was about to shake the very foundation of the case. The papers contained evidence that no one had seen before. It was proof that her mother had been hiding something, a secret so deep and dangerous that it threatened to tear apart everything they thought they knew about this custody battle. The courtroom waited for the judge to speak, to make sense of the documents Lily had just presented. But the silence dragged on, thick with tension. Finally, the judge set the papers down and looked at Lily, then at her mother, her expression unreadable. "This changes everything," she said, her voice firm and final. The room seemed to exhale collectively, and all eyes turned to the mother, whose face was now flushed with a mix of shame and fury. Lily's eyes remained steady, her small body no longer trembling with fear. She had taken control of her own story, and in doing so, she had shifted the entire narrative of the trial. But what had she just revealed? What was the secret that had shocked the courtroom into silence? And how would this affect the future of her relationship with her parents? The audience, like the people in that courtroom, was left hanging in suspense, desperate to know the truth. The answers were just out of reach, and the most critical part of the story was yet to be revealed. The battle for custody wasn't over, but it was clear that everything had just changed. And Lily? She had just shown the world that sometimes the most powerful thing a child can do is speak their truth. The courtroom buzzed with confusion as the judge, still holding the papers, studied them in silence. Lily sat motionless in her seat, her small hands folded tightly in her lap. Her mother, on the other hand, was no longer hiding her unease. She had gone pale, her mouth set in a hard line, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. Her grip tightened around the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white, but she remained silent, unable to hide her discomfort. The judge finally lifted her gaze from the papers and looked across the room at the mother. "This evidence changes the course of this trial," she said, her voice unwavering. "And it's clear that we need to understand exactly what's going on before proceeding." The room remained silent, every person in it sensing that the truth was just about to unravel in ways no one had expected. Lily's mother shot a quick glance toward her daughter, her eyes narrowing, but the girl didn't flinch. Lily remained calm, though her heart was racing. She had known this moment was coming. She had spent weeks, even months, working up the courage to show the judge what she had kept hidden. It wasn't easy to carry such a heavy secret, especially when the very people who were supposed to protect her were the ones she feared the most. But she knew that if she didn't act, the life she wanted, the life with her father, would slip away forever. The papers in the judge's hands told a story that nobody could have predicted. They weren't just legal documents. They were records of manipulation, deception, and cruelty. They included messages from a mother, texts and emails that revealed a pattern of controlling behavior and emotional abuse. But it wasn't just about the mother's actions. The documents also included evidence of attempts to alienate Lily from her father, subtly and sometimes not so subtly, pushing her away at every opportunity. Lily had lived with this reality for as long as she could remember, and while she had never fully understood the complexity of her mother's actions, she had felt the weight of it in her bones. Her father had always been there for her, always been kind and loving. But her mother had turned their relationship into something toxic, using guilt and manipulation to control both Lily and her father. It had been years of subtle tactics and emotional games that left Lily trapped in the middle, unsure of whom to trust. But what Lily had never expected, what no one had expected, was for her to be the one to expose it. The courtroom, which had been so sure of the mother's case, was now reeling from the revelation. No one could ignore what had just been laid out before them. This wasn't a simple custody battle anymore. This was a fight for control, a battle between a mother who had crossed the line and a father who had been silenced by fear. And Lily, in that moment, was the one who held the power. The judge's voice broke the silence, her words firm but cautious. "I'll need to review these documents more thoroughly before making any further decisions. But I'm calling a recess for now. We'll reconvene tomorrow." As the gavel came down, the mother's face twisted with rage, but she quickly masked it with a false smile. She stood up, gathering her papers, but not before throwing a cold, venomous glance at Lily. It was a look that sent a chill down the young girl's spine, but she didn't look away. She had finally done what she needed to do. As the courtroom emptied, the murmurs of the crowd echoed in Lily's ears. Some whispered about her bravery, while others questioned how such a young girl could have carried the weight of those secrets for so long. But Lily didn't hear them. Her mind was focused on one thing. She had taken a stand for her father. She had chosen him, and now it was time to face the consequences. When Lily and her father were finally alone, they sat in the small, quiet hallway just outside the courtroom. He wrapped his arm around her shoulder, pulling her close. "You did the right thing, sweetheart," he whispered. His voice was soft, but there was a firmness to it, a steadiness that made Lily feel safer than she had in years. She nodded, though the lump in her throat made it hard to speak. "I was so scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I couldn't let her keep doing this. Not to you. Not to me." Her father's heart broke for her in that moment. He had always known how strong she was, but seeing her finally face the truth took his breath away. "You're incredible, Lily," he said. "Incredible. I'm so proud of you. I know this wasn't easy." But while Lily's father tried to offer her words of comfort, there was still the looming uncertainty of what would happen next. No one knew how the judge would interpret the new evidence. Would it be enough to change the course of the trial? Could it undo years of emotional manipulation and damage? As the hours passed, Lily sat in silence, replaying the events in her mind. Her stomach twisted with nerves, but she felt a sense of clarity too. For the first time in a long time, she knew she had done the right thing. And yet there was still something missing, something unresolved. The whole truth had yet to come to light. The documents in the judge's hands were just the beginning. There was more to uncover, more pieces of the puzzle that had yet to be revealed. The next day, the courtroom was even more crowded than before. The buzz of speculation filled the air, and Lily could sense the weight of all those eyes on her. The judge was prepared to make her ruling, but the tension in the room was palpable. As Lily sat beside her father, her hands sweaty and her heart racing, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something even bigger than what they had already uncovered. When the judge entered and took her seat, the room fell silent once again. She cleared her throat and glanced at the documents in front of her. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented to me over the past few days," she began. "And while there are still questions that remain, it's clear that the dynamics of this case have changed significantly." Her words hung in the air, and Lily felt her breath catch in her chest. What was the judge about to say? How would this end? But before the judge could continue, Lily's mother stood up abruptly. Her face was flushed with anger, her eyes wild. "This is all a lie," she shouted, her voice trembling with fury. "None of this is true. You can't just believe her. She's just a child." Her outburst reverberated through the room, causing a ripple of shock among the spectators. But Lily wasn't afraid anymore. She had done what she had to do. The truth had come out, and now the rest was up to the judge. And as she looked up at her father, she knew that whatever happened next, they had already won. The courtroom had erupted in chaos after Lily's mother's outburst. The judge's gavel rang out, attempting to regain control of the situation. But the atmosphere was electric, charged with the weight of emotions from all sides. Lily sat still, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, while her father placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. The tension was thick, and despite her earlier courage, Lily couldn't help but feel a tremor of fear run through her. Her mother's anger was palpable, and her reaction only deepened the mystery. What was her mother hiding? What would she do next? Lily's mother paced back and forth in front of the judge's bench, her heels clicking sharply against the floor with each step. She wasn't just angry, she was terrified. The evidence Lily had presented, the texts, the emails, the documented behavior, had shattered her carefully crafted image. No longer could she claim to be the wrong party, the protective mother fighting for her child's best interests. The truth was coming to light, and she had no idea how to stop it. The lie she had been living was unraveling thread by thread, and with each piece that fell, her grip on the situation loosened. "You need to understand," Lily's mother spat, her voice shaking with venom. This isn't what it seems. That girl, she's been brainwashed. He's been turning her against me. She doesn't know what she's talking about." Her words hung in the air, desperate and defensive. Everyone in the room felt the shift, the way her tone wavered between anger and fear. There was no longer any certainty in her words, only panic. And that panic was only deepening the questions swirling in the minds of the judge and those watching the case unfold. What had really been going on behind closed doors? How far had this mother been willing to go to manipulate her own daughter? Lily's father stood slowly, his hand still on her shoulder, and faced the judge with a calmness that contrasted sharply with his ex-wife's outburst. He had been fighting this battle for years, but the real war had only just begun. As much as he wanted to believe that the truth would prevail, there was still so much unknown. His daughter had bravely come forward, but what would it take for the full extent of the damage to be acknowledged? And more importantly, how would the judge respond to a mother so clearly rattled by the revelations? "I've known Lily all her life," he said, his voice steady, yet filled with an undercurrent of emotion. "She's not lying. She's never lied to me, not like this. I've watched her struggle in silence, and I've seen her carry this weight for so long. You don't understand what she's been through, what both of us have been through. But I'm asking for a chance to fix that, a chance to heal, to rebuild, and to protect her." The room fell silent again, and the judge, still looking at the evidence in front of her, paused for a long moment. She hadn't made her decision yet. No one knew which way this case would turn, but Lily's mother wasn't going down without a fight. Her outburst wasn't just an attempt to deflect blame. It was the last-ditch effort of someone trying to claw back control. The question was, how far was she willing to go? As the minutes dragged on, a new voice suddenly entered the conversation. A voice that no one had anticipated, but one that could change the course of everything. The courtroom door creaked open, and a figure stepped forward, a man who hadn't been present during the earlier hearings. It was Lily's uncle, her mother's brother, and he walked slowly toward the stand, his face grim. No one had expected him, and certainly no one knew why he was there. "Your Honor," he began, his voice low but clear, "I have information that I believe is relevant to this case. Information that could change how you view the dynamics between Lily's parents." Everyone turned toward him, intrigued, yet uncertain. What could this man know that would add to the already complex situation? His presence was both surprising and unsettling. Lily's mother's eyes widened in horror, and for a moment, it was as though the very ground beneath her feet had shifted. She had no idea what he was about to reveal, but she knew it wouldn't be good. This wasn't just any family member. This was someone who had witnessed the toxic side of her relationship with Lily, someone who knew the secrets she had kept hidden. The mother's face paled, and she took a step back, as if trying to distance herself from the storm that was about to break. "I've seen things that shouldn't have happened," the uncle continued, his voice unwavering. "Things I've tried to ignore for too long. But I can't stand by and watch my niece suffer anymore. I've watched her mother manipulate her, use guilt and fear to keep her in line. I've watched as Lily's father was painted as the villain, when all along he's been nothing but a loving father. The truth needs to come out." The mother stood frozen, her hands trembling at her sides. She had never expected this. Her brother, the one person she thought would support her, had turned against her. His words cut deep, and the look of shock on her face was undeniable. It was clear that she had underestimated the people around her, including her own family. Lily glanced up at her father, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea that her uncle had known all this time, had seen her mother's behavior from an outside perspective. It gave her a sense of validation, knowing that the truth was starting to be recognized, but it also brought a new layer of uncertainty. What would happen now? What would her mother do with this new revelation? The judge, her expression unreadable, turned her attention back to the papers in front of her. "I will review the testimony and the new evidence. The situation has escalated far beyond what we initially anticipated." She paused, her eyes scanning the room. "This will require further investigation. We need to uncover the full picture, all the facts, before any decision is made. I will schedule another hearing, but in the meantime, I strongly advise both parties to reconsider their positions. There is more to this than meets the eye," The room fell into a stunned silence. The judge's words echoed in Lily's mind as she sat quietly beside her father. It wasn't over yet. The twists and turns were far from finished. While the new revelations had shed light on the darkness in her mother's actions, there were still more questions to be answered. What had truly happened between her parents? What other secrets had been buried beneath the surface? And most importantly, who would come out victorious in this fight for Lily's future? As the courtroom cleared, Lily's mind raced. Her heart was torn between the relief of the truth coming to light and the dread of what might come next. The battle wasn't over. But one thing was clear. The stakes were higher than ever. And no one, not even her mother, could keep the truth hidden forever. The next few days felt like an eternity for Lily. Every time she closed her eyes, the images from the courtroom replayed in her mind. Her mother's frantic outbursts, her uncle's unexpected testimony, and the cold, calculating look her mother had given him when he spoke. It was as if everything she had known, everything she had feared, was beginning to come undone. Lily found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Part of her was relieved that at least some of the truth had been revealed, that someone else had stepped forward to validate what she had been through. But another part of her was consumed with dread. The final hearing was coming up, and with each passing hour, the tension mounted. What would the judge decide? Would she take into account the new testimony? Would Lily's father finally get the chance he deserved to prove his love and capability as a parent? Lily could sense the growing anxiety in her father. Despite his calm exterior, she could tell that the uncertainty was gnawing at him, too. He had been so hopeful, so confident that this would be the turning point. But now, as the day of the final hearing drew near, there was no telling what might happen. He would never say it aloud, but Lily knew he feared the possibility that it might not be enough, that the case might still fall in favor of her mother. And if that happened, what would Lily's life look like? Could she really go back to living under the same roof as her mother, knowing what she knew now? In the days leading up to the hearing, Lily's mother had become almost a shadow in her own home. She moved like a ghost, constantly in motion, but with no real purpose. And when Lily would cross paths with her, the tension was palpable. Her mother never spoke to her directly anymore, but Lily could see the dark, calculating look in her eyes, the same look she had always seen when things didn't go her way. It was a warning, a reminder that her mother was still playing a game, still trying to find a way to twist the situation in her favor. One afternoon, as Lily was sitting in the living room with her father, going over some final notes for the hearing, she heard the doorbell ring. The sound echoed through the house, followed by the heavy footsteps of her mother approaching the front door. It was strange. The silence had been so thick between them that Lily couldn't remember the last time her mother had gone out of her way to speak to anyone. When her mother returned, she had a strange look on her face, something almost like satisfaction, but it was hard to tell. She didn't say a word, but Lily could sense that something had changed. Whatever conversation had taken place on the other side of that door seemed to have altered her mother's demeanor. It was as though she had come to a decision, something final. A few hours later, as dusk fell over the house, her mother left without a word, leaving Lily and her father in the quiet stillness of the evening. "What's going on, Dad?" Lily asked quietly, her voice laced with unease. "What's happening now? Why do I feel like everything is about to explode?" Her father's face was shadowed with concern. He took a deep breath and looked down at his notes, the words blurry for a moment. "I don't know, sweetheart. I really don't. But we've done everything we can. Now we just have to wait and see what happens." But the waiting was becoming unbearable. Each moment stretched longer, the uncertainty growing with every tick of the clock. And then, the day of the final hearing arrived. The courtroom was even more packed than before. Word had gotten out about the shocking developments in the case, and now there was an air of anticipation that seemed to hang over the proceedings. Lily's mother was noticeably absent when the session began, her usual confident posture replaced by something colder, more calculating. She didn't even look in Lily's direction as she entered the room. Lily's heart raced as she sat beside her father. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her, some sympathetic, others judgmental, but none of it mattered now. All that mattered was that this was the moment of truth. She had done everything she could to fight for her future, for a life away from the manipulation and control that had poisoned her relationship with her mother. Now, she had to let it unfold. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. There was an unmistakable gravity in her movements as she took her seat, her expression solemn as she reviewed the final pieces of evidence laid before her. The tension was thick, almost suffocating, as everyone waited for her to speak. Lily could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears as she looked at her father. He was sitting up straighter now, his hand resting lightly on hers, offering a comforting presence in the midst of the chaos. But even he seemed nervous, his eyes flickering between the judge and the documents on the table. He had put everything on the line for this moment. This was his last chance to prove to the world, and to Lily, that he could be the father she deserved. The judge finally lifted her eyes, and when she spoke, her voice was steady and calm, though it carried a weight that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. After reviewing the evidence presented in this case, including the testimony from Lily's uncle and the evidence submitted by both parties, it has become clear that this case is not as straightforward as it seemed. The complexities of parental influence, emotional manipulation, and the well-being of the child are all at the forefront of this decision. And while we are not prepared to make a final ruling at this time, it is clear that the dynamics at play here must be fully examined. Lily's stomach tightened. It wasn't the resolution they had hoped for, but it wasn't a complete loss either. The judge's words confirmed that the case wasn't over, that there was still more to explore, more to uncover. But the path forward felt uncertain, as if the weight of the truth was still shifting, still out of reach. As the judge stood up, signaling the end of the session, Lily could sense the shift in the air. The courtroom had grown tense with the knowledge that this was just the beginning. There was still more to come, and no one knew what would happen next. Her mother, who had been quiet throughout the hearing, stood up slowly. Her eyes locked onto Lily's for a brief, searing moment before she turned away, her lips pressed into a tight line. Lily's heart pounded as she realized that the worst was far from over. This was the calm before the storm. And just as the courtroom began to empty, Lily felt her mother's cold gaze on her once again, this time filled with something darker than before. It was a warning. The game was far from finished. As Lily and her father stood up to leave the courtroom, the air was thick with tension, and their steps seemed heavier than usual. The case wasn't over yet, but the uncertainty was gnawing at them both. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to shift, that the battle they had fought so far was only a small part of a much bigger game. Her mother's cold stare, just before she turned away, lingered in her mind. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment to play her next move, and Lily wasn't sure what that would look like. The feeling of unease followed them as they left the courthouse, and the once comforting hum of the city outside seemed more ominous now. Her father had been silent for most of the walk, his face lost in thought, and Lily could sense that he, too, was bracing himself for what was to come. That night, as they sat in their small apartment, going over their plans for the next hearing, Lily couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. It wasn't just the case anymore. There was something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface, that was beginning to unravel. She tried to push the thought away, focusing on the papers in front of her, but the gnawing feeling wouldn't let go. It wasn't until the phone rang late that evening that things began to take a turn. Lily was alone in the living room when the shrill sound of the phone startled her. She glanced at the screen, and her heart dropped. The caller ID read, "Unknown." She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello," she said, her voice trembling slightly. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a brief second, she thought it might just be a wrong number. But then, a voice that sent chills down her spine spoke. "It's me, your mother," the voice said, a cold, almost unnatural calmness in her tone. Lily's stomach twisted. She hadn't expected this, hadn't anticipated that her mother would make contact after everything that had happened. "I'm warning you," her mother continued, her voice low and dangerous. "You think you know everything, but you have no idea what you're getting into. There's more at play here than you realize." Lily's heart pounded in her chest, and she exchanged a quick glance with her father, who had entered the room. His eyes widened in disbelief, and without thinking, He rushed over to take the phone from her. "Don't listen to her," he said urgently, but Lily's mother didn't let him interrupt. "You don't understand. This isn't just about custody or your rights or any of that. There's something much bigger than this. I'm not going to let you win this. You think I've been the one holding all the power? You think I've been the one playing dirty? Wait until you find out who else is involved in this," her mother hissed, her voice growing more erratic. The line went dead. Lily stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat. Her father slowly set the phone down, his face pale. "What was that about?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you think she meant by that? Who else is involved?" Lily shook her head, unable to comprehend it fully. Her mother had always been manipulative, but this was something else entirely. It was as if there were forces beyond her own control, forces that Lily hadn't even considered. She glanced over at her father, who looked just as confused and concerned as she felt. "I don't know, Dad. I think she's hiding something. She's been acting so strange lately. And now she says there's more to this than we realize. What does that even mean?" The tension in the room had escalated to an almost unbearable level. Neither of them had any answers, only more questions. What was her mother really up to? What kind of power did she have that they didn't know about? And how could they possibly fight an unknown enemy when they didn't even know what they were up against? The next day, Lily couldn't shake the unease that had settled over her. She couldn't focus on school, couldn't concentrate on anything except the phone call. It was like a dark cloud had descended over her, and the weight of her mother's cryptic warning hung heavy in her mind. She knew something big was about to happen, something that could change everything. But she had no idea what that would be. As the days passed, the feeling of impending disaster grew stronger. Lily and her father tried to continue as best as they could, but the sense of uncertainty seemed to cloud their every move. The next court date loomed ahead, and every step they took felt like a step towards something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. And then, just when they thought they might have a moment of relief, an unexpected visitor showed up at their doorstep. It was a man they didn't recognize, dressed in a dark suit, his expression hard to read. Lily's father opened the door cautiously, and the man introduced himself as a lawyer. "I'm here on behalf of your ex-wife," the man said, his voice cold and professional. "You've been served." He handed over a thick envelope, and with that, he turned and left as abruptly as he had come. Lily's father stood there, staring at the envelope in his hand, his face draining of color. Lily's heart dropped as she watched him slowly open the envelope, the weight of what it might contain sinking in. He pulled out the papers, scanning through them quickly, before his eyes widened in shock. "This is," his voice faltered, and he looked up at Lily with a grim expression. "This is a restraining order." Lily's breath caught in her throat as she processed what her father had just said. A restraining order? Against him? It didn't make any sense. How could her mother possibly claim that? "She's trying to keep me away from you," he murmured, his voice thick with disbelief. "She's not just trying to win in court. She's trying to destroy me. She's trying to make sure I have no chance at getting you back." Lily felt her chest tighten. This was the moment she had feared. Her mother wasn't just playing dirty. She was going to extreme lengths to make sure that Lily stayed under her control. And now, it wasn't just a battle for custody. It was a fight for their lives. Her father gripped the papers tightly, his knuckles white. "We're not giving up. Not now, not ever. But we have to be ready. She's not backing down. And neither will we." The stakes had just been raised higher than they could have imagined. What had once been a legal battle was now something far more dangerous, far more personal. Lily wasn't sure what her mother's next move would be, but one thing was certain. This war was far from over, and it was only going to get worse. The days leading up to the next hearing were tense. Lily and her father couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was looming just around the corner. The restraining order her mother had served him was just the beginning of her efforts to destroy any hope they had of gaining custody. They spent sleepless nights trying to figure out a strategy to understand what her mother was really after. But every time they thought they had a handle on it, another twist would come, leaving them feeling more helpless. Lily's mother had always been unpredictable, but now it seemed like she was playing a game no one else could understand. What was her end goal? Was she really willing to go this far, to destroy her own family? Lily's mind raced with questions, but she tried to push them aside. She had to stay focused, had to stay strong for her father. Then, the day of the hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed again, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. This was it, the final showdown. Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she sat next to her father, both of them bracing for whatever was about to unfold. Her mother, as usual, was sitting across the room, her cold eyes never leaving Lily's face. The tension between them was palpable, and Lily could feel the weight of everything pressing down on her. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Everyone waited for the proceedings to begin, but something was different this time. The usual formalities were brushed aside as the judge immediately turned to Lily's mother, who stood up and walked to the front of the room. Lily's stomach dropped. Her mother wasn't supposed to speak first. She had always been on the defensive, forced to react to the evidence presented. But now, it was clear that she had something planned. "I have something to reveal," her mother's voice rang out, steady but filled with an ominous tone. "Something that will change everything." The entire courtroom held its breath as Lily's mother handed a thick file of documents to the judge. The judge glanced at the papers briefly, then turned back to her mother. "What is this?" the judge asked, her voice sharp. Lily's mother smirked, her eyes gleaming with confidence. "These are records," she said slowly, "of my ex-husband's past. The things he's done, the things he's hidden. I've kept them quiet for years. But now, it's time for the truth to come out." Lily's heart skipped a beat. What was she talking about? What could her mother possibly have on her father that could change everything? Her father's face went pale, his eyes wide in disbelief. This wasn't the game they had been prepared for. This was something far more dangerous. The judge skimmed through the documents, her expression unreadable. She looked up at Lily's father, her voice low and careful. "Is this true?" she asked. Her father's voice cracked as he replied, "No, those documents, they're fabricated. I don't know what she's trying to do, but it's not true." But the damage was done. The weight of the accusation hung heavily in the air, casting doubt on everything they had worked for. Lily could see it in the judge's eyes. She wasn't convinced. The truth was slipping further and further from their grasp. The courtroom was silent as the judge turned her attention to Lily's mother, who was now watching the scene unfold with a twisted sense of satisfaction. "I have one last piece of evidence," Lily's mother said, her voice dripping with malice. She stood up and walked toward the witness stand, holding a small box in her hands. "This is the final nail in the coffin. This is the truth no one else has known." Lily's breath caught in her throat. What was she about to do? What could possibly be left to expose? Her mother opened the box, revealing a small, old-fashioned video camera. With a chilling smile, she turned it on and pressed play. The footage that filled the screen left everyone in the room stunned. It showed Lily's father in a meeting with a man they had never seen before, speaking in hushed tones about deals and promises. The man's face was blurry, but Lily could make out the words, the tone. Her father had been involved in something underhanded, something dangerous. The shockwave hit Lily like a physical blow. She stared at the screen, unable to process what she was seeing. Was this real? Was her father really involved in something like this? Was he the person her mother had always accused him of being? The courtroom was silent, but the weight of the moment felt suffocating. Lily turned to look at her father, who was now standing frozen, his face pale, his hands shaking. "Dad," she whispered, her voice cracking. "What is this? What's going on?" Her father's eyes were filled with fear and regret, but his lips barely moved as he spoke. "I didn't want you to know this, Lily. I didn't want anyone to know." The words hung in the air, and the silence in the room was deafening. Just when it seemed like everything was about to come crashing down, a sharp voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." Lily's uncle, who had been quietly watching from the back, suddenly stood up, his voice filled with authority. "I've had enough of this." The courtroom gasped as Lily's uncle walked toward the judge, holding up a large stack of papers. "I've been holding on to this for a long time," he continued, "but I think it's time you all heard the truth. The full truth." He handed the papers to the judge, who looked over them carefully. As she scanned through the documents, Her face grew more and more shocked. The truth was unfolding in real time, and the courtroom was now on the edge of their seats, waiting for the final revelation. "I'm not the only one who has been hiding things," Lily's uncle said. "You see, all these years your mother has been controlling everything. She's been manipulating not just Lily's father, but everyone around her. The documents she showed you are fake, the video footage is staged. And this is what she's been hiding all along." Lily watched in disbelief as her uncle revealed documents that exposed her mother's past actions. Her involvement in illegal activities, her manipulation of others, and her plans to destroy everyone who stood in her way. The truth was more shocking than anything Lily could have imagined. Her mother's face contorted with rage as she stood up, ready to protest. But it was too late. The evidence had already been presented, and it was clear who the real villain was. The judge's voice cut through the chaos. "This is enough. I will make my ruling now." Lily felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was bittersweet. The truth had come out, but at what cost? Her family was shattered, torn apart by secrets and lies. She glanced at her father, whose face was filled with sorrow. The judge paused for a moment, her gaze sweeping over the courtroom before she spoke the words that would change everything. "Lily will be placed in her father's custody," she declared. "The actions of the mother in this case have been deemed manipulative and dangerous, and the evidence presented shows a clear pattern of abuse and deception. The child's well-being is the court's highest priority, and from here on, her safety will be in the hands of her father." Lily couldn't believe it. The victory was theirs, but it was not without pain. Her father would finally be the parent she had always needed, but the wounds of the past were deep, and the road ahead was uncertain. As they left the courtroom together, her father's hand gently resting on her shoulder, Lily couldn't help but wonder, was this the end of the battle? Or was it only the beginning of a new chapter in their complicated story? One thing was for sure, the fight was far from over. But at least now, they could move forward together. As Lily and her father left the courtroom, the weight of the verdict began to settle in. The long months of uncertainty, the sleepless nights, the fear, they were all finally behind them. They stepped into the bright sunlight outside, the cool breeze feeling almost surreal after everything that had happened. Lily's heart was still racing, her mind replaying every moment of the hearing. The relief was there, but it was mixed with the overwhelming realization of just how much their lives had been turned upside down. Her father turned to her, his voice soft. "We did it, Lily. I promise you. I'll do everything I can to make sure you're safe and happy from now on." Lily smiled faintly, her eyes a little teary. "I know, Dad. I just never imagined it would end this way. I thought I was going to lose you." "I know, sweetheart," he said, pulling her into a tight hug. "But we're going to be okay. This is our chance to rebuild, to make things right." They didn't speak much more as they walked to their car, both lost in thought. As much as the verdict had been in their favor, there was still so much to process. Her mother was out of their lives for now, but the damage she had done couldn't be erased so easily. Lily's mind kept circling back to the person she thought she knew, the mother who had been so cold, so calculating. The same woman who had manipulated every situation to fit her needs. How had it all gotten to this point? The drive home felt like an eternity. The silence between them was comfortable, but it wasn't easy. There were questions still lingering, things Lily needed to understand. But for now, she was content to simply be with her father, knowing they were finally going to have the chance to build a future together, one that didn't revolve around fear and manipulation. A few days later, Lily's father sat her down for a serious conversation. "There's something we need to talk about," he began, his voice steady but filled with an underlying tension. "I know we've been through a lot, and I want you to know that what happened, what your mother did, it wasn't your fault. None of it. But there are things I should have told you earlier. About my past." Lily looked at him, her heart thumping in her chest. "Dad, you don't have to explain everything. I'm just glad we're together." "I know," he said, his eyes softening. "But I can't keep anything from you anymore. There are things you need to know about the man I was before. The man I didn't want you to ever know." He went on to explain parts of his life that had remained hidden for years. The mistakes he had made in his younger years, the people he had been involved with, and how it all had led him to meet Lily's mother. The darkness that had once surrounded him seemed like a lifetime ago, but the guilt weighed on him still. He had wanted to protect Lily from that side of him, but in doing so, he had kept secrets that only made things worse. Lily listened quietly, trying to process everything. She had always known her father had a past, but hearing it from him, seeing the weight of it in his eyes, made her realize just how complicated their lives had been. It wasn't just about her mother's betrayal. It was about the choices they both had made, the path they had walked to get here. But even as the shadows of the past lingered, Lily knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let it define them. They had the chance to start fresh. Together, they could rewrite their story. She could forgive her father because she understood that everyone had their own battles, their own mistakes. What mattered now was how they moved forward. In the weeks that followed, Lily and her father slowly settled into a new routine. The court battles were over, but there were still lingering effects. Lily's trust had been shaken, not just by her mother, but by everything that had been kept from her. She spent hours talking with her father, asking questions about the past, and he patiently answered every one. Slowly but surely, they began to heal. As for her mother, the legal battles didn't stop there. Lily's father had been awarded full custody, but there were still legal repercussions her mother would have to face. It wasn't the end for her, but it was a victory for Lily. She didn't have to live in fear anymore. She didn't have to feel like she was constantly walking on eggshells. That alone was worth more than any courtroom victory. There were days when Lily would look back on everything that had happened, wondering how things had gotten so complicated. But she never lingered too long on those thoughts. She had learned something important through all of this, that the past couldn't be changed, but it didn't have to control their future. She and her father had the power to make their own choices from here on out. One evening, as they sat on the porch together, watching the sun set, Lily's father turned to her with a small smile. "You know, Lily, no matter what happens, I'll always be here. And I'll always fight for you." Lily smiled back, her heart full. "I know, Dad. I know." They sat there in comfortable silence, the past finally starting to fade into the distance. The road ahead would still have its challenges. Life was never that simple. But for the first time in a long while, Lily felt at peace. She had her father back, and together, they were going to be all right. And as the stars began to twinkle in the sky above them, Lily realized that sometimes the hardest battles led to the greatest victories. What mattered most wasn't the struggles they had endured, but the strength they had found in each other. In the end, family wasn't just about blood. It was about trust, love, and the unbreakable bond that would carry them through whatever came next.